Good morning, everyone. It's 9th of November, and we are gathering for Epic Work Items Migration Workgroup Sync. First item is John, yours, which is like a quite interesting topic around the synchronization. So, yep.
Thanks. It's very complimentary. I hope it is interesting because we're going to be here for a while. No, I'm just kidding. Has everyone read it already, or do you want me to give a brief description? What do you think? I'm seeing a thumbs up from Amanda, but I don't know whether it's for a brief description or to go in. Okay, look, I'll tell you what I'll do, right? I'll just give a quick summary. So if you remember from last week, we had to discuss two technical solutions for this problem. One of them was unidirectional sync, and the other one is what I'm calling point-in-time migration. And we wanted to specifically look at point-in-time migration to see if it produced an easier path to user value. The conclusion is that when we looked into point-in-time migration, it actually had a bunch of its own problems, and there was a whole lot of complexity there as well. And so the preferred option from the engineering side is unidirectional sync. If you're wondering what that means, it means that we would sync legacy epics with work items out of view of the user, if you like, until they're reliably syncing on an ongoing basis. All legacy epic data is backfilled into work items, and then we would be able to gradually roll out the new work item experience. Now, this is more complex, I think, or very complex in terms of a coordination challenge. The work can be parallelized, but it has to be released in a very specific order, and everyone involved in the work kind of has to know how far along the work is in the other streams of work that there are. However, anyway, there are roughly 3 streams of work that need to be done. One is feature parity with epics and work items. That's probably the largest problem. The second one is syncing of new epic changes to work items. That means every new epic created, legacy epic, needs to be have a work item created for it and synced. And then finally, we need to backfill all legacy epics into work items, and that has to happen last. There's also an undecided part here, which we can talk about later, but the question is what we do with all our views. There are 2 options. Basically, we can convert the front end of the views to use the work items API, or we can update the epics GraphQL API to optionally draw from the work items table instead. So this, as you can probably tell, is really complex and really difficult. However, we also came up with a possibility to deliver user value early, and this requires a product and UX decision. That proposal is that we would release work item epics for new groups with legacy epics disabled for those groups as an option. So the user, when creating a new group, can decide that they want to exclusively use work item epics that would disable legacy epics. And it's a much shorter route to user value because, well, we only have to complete feature parity. In fact, we can even go further and include an additional feature or something like assignees just to as a taster, as a teaser to encourage people to do it. What else? Yeah, and also like we would have to update the APIs then as well, but again, we would have to do that anyway. So before we go any further, I think there's a product decision to be made here, and we need to first of all know that this would be an acceptable first iteration. So, Melissa, I think you have the first comment.
Yeah, I was curious if for that first iteration, these groups would have access to epic boards or roadmaps. And it sounds like the answer is no. Is that right?
They'd have access to the work item implemented boards. So basically the issue boards that you have right now, but with the work items, I'm not sure how far along we can get into one quarter in order to include like all the work item types and grouping and stuff like that. So as much as we can implement functionality-wise on the work item level, that's what users basically would get. You'd onboard users onto work items to whatever state we get them to. It can be like a lot of progress or less progress. Depends on how fast we move on what roadblocks we meet. But the idea is that they will not. So basically, onboarding people on work items means disabling the legacy epics because of the dual synchronization that we can do. Because if we allow them to modify the work item epic, we need now to do the other direction synchronization in order to create the legacy epics, in order to use the legacy roadmap, in order to use all the legacy views. So in order to onboard them onto work item epics, we need to keep them away from those legacy views in order to limit the scope of the work that needs to be done.
Donald, I see you're typing, but I'll say like roadmaps are fairly low usage, but boards have more traffic. So I think it would be problematic from like the user side to not have availability to those features, and it would also be hard to message that. Like, I think we could do it as experimental, right? But we'd have to think really carefully about how to say what you're choosing to a user. So that if we could include those two items, it would be much easier to just default everyone to the new experience, for example, because you're not losing anything. It's just a little bit different.
Yeah, I think that's still somewhere like onboarding people onto this new experience somewhere at the sort of the end of the quarter where when we are more on par with the feature parity between epics and work items, and we are quite sure that there is enough functionality in there where people can move on to using these views and features and so on to do that. So that's like towards the end of the bringing it up to parity between the two.
Donald, do you want to verbalize what you're typing? We can type for you.
Yeah, I don't think I haven't tried it or anything, but I don't think the effort to get parity with work item boards and epic boards would be too high of an effort. The main reason why we haven't tried it with tasks is because we're still trying to figure out how like children items should look like on a board, and if it even makes sense to have a board with tasks, or if that only makes sense to have it within like swim lanes, etc. But now as I'm saying that, there may be more of an effort to match swim lanes on issue boards with work item epics. So we would probably have to add that to the list of
work streams
parity things. Yeah.
Can I ask
that one is definitely used very often, the group by epic.
Yeah, I use that a lot. So Natalia said the same thing, although that it might not be that hard to actually migrate epic boards. Do you think that it makes much difference that we would need to support both? So there would basically be a switch, and I guess like not a switch, but like a setting or a feature flag, whatever, probably a setting that indicates the group is using work items, and so the epic boards would have to switch to use the work items API in that case, or use the epics API in the default case.
Yeah, I think that's okay as long as we don't have to have both at the same time. So support like epic boards with both legacy epics and work item epics.
That's actually my question, because what if in the case of a top level epic is on legacy and they create, I'm sorry, a top level group is on legacy and they create a subgroup, and the subgroup gets the new experience, but they want to access the epic board in the top level group, which would have a mixture of legacy and new work item epics. Like, will we just not allow subgroups to be on the new experience in that case?
Yeah, that seems like something we'll have to cut. It'll have to be root level namespaces only.
Root level. Okay, thanks.
But we don't know if a group is going to be top level forever, right? Like they can be moved.
Yeah, there are some edge cases, like if you move some existing group with legacy epics into the group which opt in for the new work item epics, then you might have this this inconsistency. So we would need to handle such edge cases, like, I don't know, don't allow moving these groups around.
On the plus side, though, we could also use this setting to make progress with issues to work items as well, right? Because it's the same principle. Actually, never mind that. Okay, so the next question is then, like this is the undecided part. Assuming we go with this, do we want to do the work on the front end to migrate those views to support both APIs? Or do we simply want to, on the back end, change the API to support drawing from the work items table or the epics table? It sounds like we probably want to go with just updating the views.
So I wanted to bring up regarding Epic boards and issue boards supporting work items API. So there are a couple of concerns there, like from the front end perspective. So with the Epic boards, if we want to populate Epic boards, say with work items API, we would need support for all the queries via work items which are supported on boards. That includes reordering of items, creation of lists, moving items around within the list. Now, from the implementation perspective, I don't know what would be more time consuming or what would require more effort, either backporting or rather updating existing boards and REST API for epics so that it uses work items as our data source, or whether it would be the front end updates where we need both the changes. We would need to update front end to be able to consume work items data structure, as well as we need those update newer queries and mutations for work items that boards can handle in terms of all the list related interactions which are there on board. And in my opinion, it might be easier to switch data source on the back end rather than updating front end, and as well as creating new queries and mutation for boards with work items. So if you want to think about long term, then certainly it makes sense to create work item specific queries and mutations for boards and roadmap, as well as update the front end. But doing both of those things together might be more time consuming and may require more effort compared to just updating our APIs so that it uses different data source and the response structure and everything remains the same.
So for boards, I think the toggle would be switching it from epic boards. So legacy epics would use legacy epic boards, and epic work items would use issue work items, the issue work item boards.
Yeah, so while we can have such a toggle that can switch between the API source or the type of data source, the thing is that we have just finished the migration of boards from using Vuex to Vue Apollo. So while it is theoretically easier to switch the data source itself, but given the vast difference between the response structure of both the APIs, we would still need to update all the front-end views to be able to handle work item data structure, because all the metadata that is presented for individual work item comes via widget-like format where metadata is buried within individual widgets, and we would need to be able to consume that on front end. And if we were to maintain two copies of the front end components which are showing this data, one using work item structure and one using legacy structure, that would be a lot of bloat to maintain just for that toggle that we are going to present to user. So I would rather have a situation where we just make sure that our APIs are backward compatible, and then we get proper time to build those new queries and update our front end once and for all, so that we don't have to deal with the toggle, because there is already a ton of code cleanup that we have scheduled for 16.7, where we are removing all the traces of UX from boards. And while we are doing it, we would also have to think about adding support for work item structure within the boards. And doing both of those things simultaneously on front end would be quite a lot of effort to be accomplishing in single quarter. So we can perhaps look into how much complicated would it be to update our existing APIs to use new data source following this unidirectional migration.
Do you think we can take this offline and just look for an answer for next week? We need a DRI for it, and we probably need an issue because like there's going to be also complexity on the back end with the back end option, and we should like get those and weigh them up.
Yeah, sure. I'll go ahead and create a spike for it.
I don't mind who the DRI is, by the way. I think it could be anyone in the working group. I just think somebody needs to take it, and if we argue, like talk about it here, it could go on forever.
Yep.
We also, I think, need a DRI for the next option as well. This is me handing everything over, like my job's done here and washing my hands of it until the next task comes along. But basically, if we agree to go with this, which it sounds like we will, we need to staff the work streams, and we need a DRI for each work stream, probably a technical DRI, somebody who can report up on progress, because that's really, really important, because we learned this during requirements migration. It's incredibly hard to track this work, and each work stream is going to have to know what the other is working on and how far along that is. We have 13 engineers, I think, who are members of this working group. I think in total we have 16 available to staff these work streams when you count everybody in product planning, project management, 2 people from knowledge, 1 person from optimize. So we have quite a lot of capacity to assign to the different work streams. The question is like, how many people should be in each one? What are the tasks that need done? So is anyone available to take that on for next week? Ideally, we would have an idea of who these folks are in time for next week's meeting. And we'll probably also need to like quantify how far along, if at all, each work stream already is.
I'd be happy to take one, but I'm still I don't have an answer yet because of the borrow ending or not ending, but I guess I can still do the DRI of one of the things.
Yeah, you're on a borrow, so I don't want to land more stuff on your plate. Like,
yeah, maybe you can be a DRI for one of the work streams after we figure out the borrow date. But I appreciate you volunteering, Alexandru.
all right, if nobody else wants to step up,
I can do it, so you don't have to volunteer.
While we wait, I have a question. I just want to make sure I understand the proposal. As I'm reading it again, I'm confused. All right, so the proposal is you sync from the legacy epics table to work items. So things are created on the epics table and they get replicated, so to say, on an ongoing basis. And that sync will remain in place until we complete parity, right? With roadmaps, boards, anything else.
Until we remove everybody from legacy epics. Yeah.
If that's the case, then does it matter? Like boards would be available and roadmaps will be available, right? Because you'll have data both places. The only difference is we're replicating data. And theoretically, maybe when you open like the detail page, you would see the work item view. No?
Yeah, that's true.
Is it? Because what if they create something in the work item view?
They can't.
Yeah,
that's the way
they
this
wouldn't
would
be
have
able
to
to,
go.
right?
Yeah, we would have to not allow work items at all. The reason to circumvent this and allow this idea of groups with only work item epics is to bring user value earlier.
Oh, I see. So we would have that sync for everyone?
Yeah.
We would turn it on for every single epic in prod, right? But then there's this parallel experience, and that would be completely transparent to users, like they wouldn't know any of this is happening. But then you're saying on the side, we could enable the work items experience for new groups because they don't have any data to sync.
Exactly.
And those will be the people that don't have roadmaps and boards potentially, right? Because they don't have data in the epics table.
Yeah, but I mean, it would be better if we could, I think, offer them the full experience with boards. And I mean, part of the reason to do this is to de-risk the final thing, right? And eventually we'll need boards and roadmaps to work anyway. So we can't get to the point where everyone's on the work item epic without also addressing boards and
yeah, and we
roadmaps.
could do the new people before we have the sync done, right? Because it's sort of independent. They're two separate things. Okay.
Yeah, so that's like a fourth. Probably you could count it in feature priority if you want, or we can break it out into a separate work stream.
I have one more question around that. I'm not sure if this is already clear. I mean, we discussed in the past that we are implementing the sync mechanism. So if we change something on the work items epics, they should be synced to the legacy epics, right? And only then
No, the other way around.
No?
The other way around. It's one directional.
So we're thinking one directional. So no one can change anything on the work items epics, because changes wouldn't be reflected on the legacy epics, right? So it would be like a read-only view, the new experience.
No, when they switch to work items, they get the full experience, but legacy epics are switched off at that point.
Oh, okay. So we're making them choose. Oh,
if we're waiting until parity, why do we need an ongoing sync? Right? If it's all going to be behind the scenes and they're not going to see it, it will be like really short-lived, right? The sync will be like I don't know.
Because like when you do the switch, you need to have data already there. Or like given that you have like 10,000 epics, you cannot wait for like 3 hours for everything to be migrated. So we're doing the ongoing sync, but because we only sync from legacy onto work item, you cannot edit the work item. You can only read basically from that. And then when we are ready to, like we have the feature parity, everything is ready, we can just switch something and just use the work item interfaces, UIs, and all that stuff. Because you already have the data, so now you are able to actually edit the work item epics and stuff in the work items UI, because you already have the data sync. So you don't have to do this downtime of waiting to sync the last bits or things like that.
But we won't have everything. And I'm just like assuming how it will work. Like when you update something on legacy epics, you'll kind of go create the record and work items, right? And kind of slowly backfill, but you'll still have gaps, right? Before you can switch.
Correct. That's actually a really important point, is that you can't just create a work item epic from each new epic created. You have to find or update. Find, create, or update. So like, create or update, right? So like basically any change somebody makes to any epic, a work item epic has to be created, found, or created, right, for that change. Then we do a backfill, which fills in all the gaps for all the but that can only happen after that syncing mechanism is built. It can't happen any other time. Now we can start work on it, but it can't actually be run. And part of the reason, like, if you're interested in the context, part of the reason we leant towards this was Jan brought up the point that, like, if we do a one-time point in time import, if it fails, we're in a really tricky spot. There are a couple of reasons why it can fail. One's availability. That's not really a problem. You just run it again and it imports. But if there's a runtime error, it doesn't matter how many times you run the import, that particular epic will never be imported. And we're in a really difficult spot then. We have to go into disaster recovery at that point and just try to recover their data. It's really messy, it's really difficult, and at that point, unidirectional sync really works because by the time we migrate customers over, it's already been running for a while. There should be the exact same number of work item epics that there are legacy epics in the database. It's a very simple check, and if those two numbers are accurate, we can be reasonably sure that the syncing is working properly, the backfill has worked, and we're ready to move customers onto the new experience.
And at that point, then we will allow them to opt in to the new experience and let them know that all the epics will be out of sync. And okay, yeah, that makes sense.
I think we'll actually have to either roll it out for them. I'm not sure, but once they switch, there's no going back. Because as soon as you start making changes to the work items epics, they're not reflected in your old data anyway. So as soon as they switch, we have to remove legacy epics from the interface entirely. Not that it'll make much difference for them anyway. Like they'll just use a slightly different part of the interface for their epics. The boards should still work, roadmaps and lists should still work.
Okay.
Am I missing anything, or why don't we migrate everything and after migration we enable the unidirectional sync? Because this way we migrated everything already and people still using the old data, but when we finish the migration we enable the unidirectional sync, so any new changes will be synced to work items, but we already migrated in the backend. So we just keep things going from now on until everything is ready, and then we can move forward.
And because there'd be data loss between the point the backfill finishes and the point you enable the sync. Even if it was very short, there'd be data loss in between.
Yeah, you have to have sync running when you run the backfilling, because otherwise that split second you'll lose a comment, a update on description. And the other thing is, like, while we're working on that, we'll detect bits and pieces that actually need to be synced. As you're implementing the syncing mechanism, now you know that in the backfilling, this bit needs to go to that bit, and that information needs to go to this other place, right? So that is sort of another way or a process to collect what exactly needs to be backfilled into what.
Makes sense. Thanks for clarifying.
Melissa's still confused.
I'm thinking, I'm a little bit, I may need a little bit of time because I'm like, not every epic is going to be touched in that window of time when that sync happens, right? There's a lot of old data that is just there. So that will need to be migrated. There will need to be some sort of like, I take everything and I copy it over with some gap in time.
That's the backfill.
Yeah.
That's backfill. And so it's basically a catch-all that runs in batches and migrates everything in the database from into the work items platform that hasn't been automatically synced.
I just think there's no getting away from, like, you're moving data in some period of time, and during that period of time, someone may change something.
That's okay. If you have the syncing in place, that's okay. So like we would add the syncing in place that flows as it is, and then the backfilling is actually doing alongside that your backfilling, and if someone happens to update, it'll update the row that you've just backfilled or that you might have updated as well. So that goes along. That's why we need to have the syncing first as an implementation in the code or database level, whatever syncing mechanism we decide to go with. And then proceed on with the backfilling of the entire legacy, all the data.
One bit I wanted to clarify is that once we do this backfilling, which happens after the synchronization works correctly, there will still have to be a couple of steps to move all the logic to actually write to the work item epics records instead of legacy epics. So during these steps, these epics through work items interfaces would still be hidden, and we would actually expose them only in the last step, when also this additional logic is moved over to the new work item epics. So it's my understanding is that we would still keep them hidden after backfilling until we are done also with additional steps which will follow after backfilling. Maybe I'm wrong, or maybe I mean, we could expose them after backfilling, but we couldn't allow them to be updated or created.
Yeah, I think you're right. Because that's ultimately right, the mechanism that allows the legacy REST Epics API to continue working. Go ahead, Don.
Yeah, I don't know if it makes sense. But the reason that we would need syncing is for users that do choose to use work items for epics, right? Or is there another reason we would need the sync?
Nah, it's for users who don't choose, and we're choosing for them. The users that do choose to start new groups and use work item epics from scratch will be able to do that under this proposal. They just won't have legacy epics then. At least by the end of the quarter, that should be available. But for everybody else to move them onto the work items platform for epics. We need to retain all of their data, but as work item epics.
But would a user choose to switch to work items until we're at parity with legacy epics? Because if they don't, could we just have a one-time switch that's not backwards compatible? So when they turn on the switch, the switch essentially migrates the legacy epic table to the work item issue table, and once they do that, there's no going back, because all the updates at that point will be to the work items table.
Yeah, that was the point in time migration. So that was the second option that we looked at and discarded it on the basis. I off the top of my head and with 5 minutes to spare, I'm not going to be able to describe all the reasons why, but they're linked from the spike issue at the top, and there's an agenda in there to the meeting, and they're pretty well summarized in there, I think. But reach out if I can help at all explain some of them. We just find a whole bunch of complexity there and risk. When you start to actually analyze that, a lot of the savings that you think you get, you don't get, and a lot of the complexity is the exact same or worse.
Okay, so the two-way sync is no longer an option. It's either unidirectionally sync or point in time, which is no sync.
Actually, bidirectional sync is still an option.
Okay.
It's just avoidable with better coordination. The main payoff of bidirectional sync is that you can stop at any time, and the system just works all the way through the process of migration. But that's also an anti-feature, if you like, because you most likely will stop at some point when we should finish the job. If we just press ahead with unidirectional sync and see the project through, we can save time. But bidirectional sync is still a possibility. We have precedent for that. We did it with requirements, and it's a possible path we could follow. Yeah.
But you're recommending the unidirectional sync, correct?
Given that, like, I mean, I'm open to contradiction, but given that we want to press on with this project, I don't know if we need the feature of being able to stop at any point. If that makes sense. And even if we did, bidirectional sync is very costly, because if you do stop, you stop at the worst possible time. You leave in this syncing logic indefinitely that's very costly, not very performant. It's an availability risk. So, I mean, it is an option if you want to look into it. We can do it.
I think unidirectional sync sounds good from the product perspective, right? Like I agree. I also worry about performance, right? Of continuously syncing data, especially for large customers. Epics have a lot higher traffic than requirements.
Does requirements use unidirectional sync or bidirectional sync?
We use bidirectional for that. Yeah.
Traffic is like multiple times smaller though for requirements than Epics.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's next steps? We still need to make a decision, right? Should we discuss more within the issue?
We can make a call here. If everyone's on board, right?
Yeah, does everyone feel like they have enough data input to make a decision? All right, anyone that objects to unidirectional will sync, if you don't want to speak up, you can do a thumbs down emoji, because I see everyone's doing thumbs up emojis. All right. Decision made.
Nobody
Look at
wants
that.
to dissent. Yeah, so we have our two follow-ups then we have two things that we really, really badly need to do. And Kushal and Donald, you both agreed to take those forward, so that's great. Cassio, we had a couple of minutes.
Okay. Not sure if this will work, but that's right. This is a work in progress. I'm still learning a lot about work items, framework, and epics and all that. But I have a small script of steps here. Let me see if I can show you all. What I did up to now is inheritable dates from the milestones only for now. So that's what I try to show. And this is only the backend, only on GraphQL. So I just created a group for Barb. I'll create a milestone in here. One from 1st of October to the end of the year. And on GraphQL, I'll get this group for bar. I've been testing already. So this show me the milestone in here and the group data. In there with GraphQL, I'll create an epic. I'll duplicate this tab. I'll create an app bar. And I'm showing in here all the widgets of the epic. For some reason, the inheritable dates is duplicated. Not sure yet why, but that's not the point. The start and due date is new since I just created the epic without passing start and due date. It creates with empty fields. So I'll just change the query to do a get in instead of a creation, and I'll use the epic ID here. We're gonna use that later. So epic ID is this one. Again, just showing all the widgets, and the inheritable dates are all empty here. So now, if I create an issue on that epic that uses that must, so I'll use this one. So if I use the milestone as well, which I just created, which has the dates, and the group is var. I'll create the issue, and it creates successfully is associated to the milestone. So if I get the epic now again, I do have the association here with the sourcing milestone for the start date, due date, and the due date and start date. It's coming from the milestone. Again, this is very early stage. I'm basically copying the code from how the epic works, all the queries and all that, and I'm still learning a little bit about the work items framework, but I think I have a little bit of a better vision now. And that's it.
Nice. Did you try it with a couple levels? Just curious. Or is it possible? Maybe it's not. Maybe it's not possible even.
Yes, I did try a couple levels, just one extra level. The queries still have to be optimized, to be honest, but I did that on the testing. On my POC, I have a lot of tests. So yeah, I tried like when there is a narrow milestone in the issue is create the epic already have an issue with a milestone, and then I create another issue with another milestone that's narrower, just to be sure, and which is wider, and all those tests are passing. So I was starting to work actually now on the inheritance from child epics. And again, the queries also needs to be improved, I think. But I'm using the base of what you did on the epics, and I'm trying to just translate those queries to work items. Yeah, I'll probably ping you on the POC when I have more data there.
Nice.
Any questions on that?
Does this account for the columns on due date and start date, or it only uses milestones?
We are using actually a new table for the dates. So the idea that we had, Eugenia and I, and again, thank you, Eugenia, for all the help. And we did a few pair programmings where she actually did most of the code. I'm just taking credit here. But yeah, the idea that we had was to create a new widget for the work items, which is I'm calling inheritable dates, but this can also be used for fixed dates. So we have a new table called date source, which is like just the central for start and due dates of work items. So these dates can be inheritable from milestones or child items or fixed on this table. So I'm not sure if I answered your question, but I think it was on this.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah,
Thanks a lot for the demo. It's nice to see it that we decided on something a couple of weeks ago and we already have demos for it. So yeah. Yeah, unless anyone wants to discuss anything else, we can, I think, call it an end here and take any additional discussions async in one of the issues. So, all right. Thanks a lot, everyone, and see you later. Bye.